Imagine a man alone on a mountainside, the fog so thick that the path ahead is hidden. Each step feels heavier than the last. His breath turns to mist, his hands are cut from the rocks. His legs tremble with effort, but he keeps moving. He climbs, even when the summit is invisible. Why do some people grow stronger while others turn back when the same steep slope confronts them? The mountain never moves. It's the climber's mind that changes. Welcome to Stoic Dhamma, a place for slowing down, breathing deeper, and exploring timeless truths with fresh eyes. In today's journey, we explore an idea as old as human struggle, that adversity doesn't just test us, it shapes us. Not all pain is punishment, some pain is preparation. And in the stillness between hardships, a quiet truth emerges. Strength is not found in escape, but in endurance. In our modern world, comfort is often sold as happiness. From streaming platforms to ergonomic chairs, fast food to dopamine-driven scrolling, everything is designed to help us avoid discomfort. Pain is treated as a glitch, suffering seen as failure, and resilience romanticized, but rarely practiced. But what if this avoidance is weakening us? What if, by insulating ourselves from life's inevitable struggles, we are also shielding ourselves from the very experiences that forge character? The Stoics believed that hardship is not an interruption of the human journey, it is the path itself. Epictetus, once a slave, taught that suffering can liberate the soul. Marcus Aurelius ruled during plague and war, yet wrote of peace within. Seneca navigated the corruption of Rome by strengthening the mind, not escaping the world. These thinkers didn't seek pain, but they didn't flee from it either. Today, we ask, how do struggles, large or small, become the raw material for mental strength? And how can ancient wisdom guide us when life grows heavy? In the Stoic worldview, life is divided into two simple categories: the things we can control and the things we cannot. We cannot stop the rain, but we can choose whether we curse it or dance in it. This clarity, according to Epictetus, is the root of freedom. Our thoughts, choices, and judgments are ours alone. Everything else, the weather, the past, the opinions of others, falls outside our reach. Pain, then, is not something to be eliminated, but to be examined. It is a signal, not a sentence. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is not just poetry, it's a roadmap. What blocks the road becomes the road? Suffering, if viewed correctly, is not a pit but a passage. To live by this principle is not to welcome pain, but to train the mind to find meaning within it. In a world obsessed with control, the Stoic response is a quiet release. Not surrender, but surrendering what doesn't belong to us. Not passive acceptance, but active focus on what we can shape. The hardship we face, loss, illness, failure, is not unique. What is unique is how we carry it. And this is where mental strength is born, not in the avoidance of difficulty, but in the response to it. Modern life, for all its speed and spectacle, has dulled our tolerance for discomfort. From childhood, we are taught to chase success and to avoid anything that feels like failure. But the Stoics remind us that difficulty is not the opposite of growth, it is the fuel for it. The mind, like the body, grows stronger through resistance. A weight unlifted never builds muscle. A challenge untested never reveals virtue. The Stoics didn't just believe this, they lived it. Today's chaos comes not from swords or sieges, but from deadlines, distractions, and digital exhaustion. Yet the battle is still within. We are pulled in every direction, likes, opinions, news cycles, and beneath it all, we are quietly asking, how do I become unshaken? The Stoic answer is not more control, but deeper understanding. Pain becomes the teacher. Challenge becomes the curriculum. To truly understand this philosophy, we must begin by asking, is the avoidance of pain making us weaker? Every time we retreat from discomfort, whether it's a difficult conversation, a failed project, or even silence, we rob ourselves of the chance to practice resilience. We become like a sword that is never tempered, beautiful but brittle. Mental strength is not an accident, it is forged in fire. When we begin to see suffering as a form of training, something shifts. Life stops being a series of obstacles and becomes a gymnasium for the soul. As the Hindu Bhagavad Gita teaches, you have the right to work, but never to the fruits of work. This echoes the Stoic view: focus on the process, not the outcome. Struggles are part of that process. They are not separate from life. They are life, asking something of us, and yet, this doesn't mean we must become ascetics or martyrs. To live stoically is not to seek suffering, but to stop fearing it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think, with mortality in mind. Even small frustrations shrink. The crowded commute, the rejected email, the hurtful comment, none of these need disturb the soul. They are opportunities to return to the inner stillness that Stoicism protects. So, how might we reframe suffering as strength? Begin with the breath. Inhale when the moment feels overwhelming. Exhale the illusion that you must control everything. Then ask, what part of this situation is mine to carry? What part is wind against the mountain? Often, you'll find that what torments you most is not the event, but your resistance to it. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, when we suffer, we should not try to run away from it. We should embrace our pain and look deeply into it. This is not weakness. This is courage, the kind of courage the Stoics revered. Courage to sit with discomfort, to listen to it, to learn. In this light, every trial becomes a teacher. The pain of loss becomes a reminder to cherish. The sting of failure becomes a lesson in humility. The ache of rejection becomes a gateway to authenticity. Each moment of hardship becomes a chance to choose, react blindly or respond with wisdom. And with each choice, strength accumulates, not the loud kind that boasts, but the quiet kind that endures. Like a tree growing roots during winter, unseen but unwavering. This is the strength the Stoics cultivated, not armor against life, but alignment with it. The mountain will not move, the fog will not clear all at once. But step by step, with a mind anchored in reason and a heart open to growth, you will climb. And in climbing, you will change, not the world, but yourself. To understand how the Stoics came to see adversity not as a curse, but as a gift, we must step back into the ancient world, a world that was raw, uncertain, and often brutal. Around the 3rd century BCE, in the aftermath of Alexander the Great's empire, Greece was no longer the cradle of calm reflection. It was a land plagued by conflict, decline, and the erosion of old values. Amid this turbulence, a new philosophical current began to take form, not in marble halls or ivory towers, but in the open air of the Stoic, a painted colonnade in the Athenian agora. It was here that Zeno of Citium began to teach a quiet revolution of the soul, that true strength is born not despite hardship, but because of it. Stoicism emerged not to decorate life with lofty thoughts, but to anchor the human spirit in the middle of chaos. It was a practical philosophy meant for soldiers, merchants, and rulers, for anyone trying to live a good life in a dangerous world. It divided life into two realms, what we can control and what we cannot. The Stoic does not waste energy resisting fate. Instead, he turns inward and cultivates character. Suffering, therefore, is not an error in the system but a forge, the fire that tests and tempers the soul. One of the clearest examples of this principle in action is the life of Epictetus. Born into slavery, Epictetus had no control over his body, his labor, or even his name. He walked with a limp, the result of a cruel master, but through reflection and discipline, he became one of the most respected philosophers of his time. He taught not with wealth or rank, but with clarity. He said, "Difficulties are things that show a person who they are." The phrase isn't merely poetic. It is diagnostic. Adversity doesn't just challenge you, it reveals you. And once revealed, you can begin the work of inner mastery. In contrast to Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius was born into immense privilege. As Emperor of Rome, he commanded legions and governed an empire, but this did not shield him from hardship. During his reign, He faced nearly continuous war, rebellion, and the Antonine Plague, a deadly epidemic that took millions of lives, including his own children. Amid all this, Marcus did not turn to indulgence or escapism. He turned inward, writing page after page of meditations, private notes to himself. He reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wasn't abstract comfort. It was how he stayed sane. These writings weren't written for others. They were written in the dark, by candlelight, under the weight of the world. Then there was Seneca, a man of intellect, wealth, and influence in the Roman court. He was tutor to Nero, one of the most infamous emperors in history. Seneca's life was filled with contradiction. He was a Stoic who lived amid corruption, a teacher of detachment who owned vast estates. Yet in his letters, he returned again and again to the principle that suffering is essential for growth. "Fire tests gold," he said. "Suffering tests brave men." Seneca's strength lay not in having resolved all tension, but in seeing clearly through it. He did not pretend that life could be controlled. He only insisted that the soul could. These three figures, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, lived vastly different lives. One enslaved, one ruling, one entangled in politics, yet they shared a common conviction that adversity, when accepted with courage and wisdom, becomes the soil from which virtue grows. Stoicism does not glorify pain. It respects pain. It acknowledges it as real, hard, often unfair, but also meaningful. Pain, they argued, strips away illusion. It reveals what is temporary and what is timeless. This is the true Stoic view. Not that you must be unfeeling, but that you must be unshaken. Marcus wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This line, often quoted, reveals a paradox. The very thing we think is blocking us, the loss, the failure, the fear, is in fact the path itself. Not around the problem, but through it. It's not just ancient wisdom. The Bhagavad Gita, a central text in Hindu philosophy, offers a similar insight. Arjuna, the warrior, is paralyzed by fear before battle. He does not want to fight. But Krishna, his divine guide, reminds him, "You have the right to work, but not to the fruits of your labor." The act of striving, of facing the storm, matters more than the outcome. Just as Stoicism teaches, the only failure is to give up on virtue. Another common Stoic practice was premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Before bed or upon waking, a Stoic might imagine the worst, losing a loved one, failing publicly, even dying. Not to dwell in fear, but to train the soul. To greet misfortune not as a surprise, but as an old companion. This exercise, echoed in Buddhist contemplation of impermanence, softens our grip on expectations. It's not pessimism, it's preparation. There is also humility in the Stoic path. Though they wrote with authority, the Stoics spoke constantly of their own failings. Seneca admitted his inconsistency. Marcus rebuked his ego. Epictetus reminded students not to boast about progress. This is because true strength does not need to announce itself. It is quiet, resilient, and patient. It does not arise from avoiding discomfort, but from working with it like a potter shaping clay, over and over again. What, then, does all this mean for us today? It means that hardship is not a detour from the path of wisdom. It is the path, whether born into chains, into power, or into a world of contradictions. The Stoics returned again and again to one idea: you cannot control the storm, but you can choose how you stand in it. When we understand this not as a metaphor, but as a lived truth, something shifts. The next time struggle appears, we don't shrink. We recognize the invitation. As Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." In the modern world, adversity no longer arrives on horseback or in the form of invading armies. It arrives quietly, dressed in emails at midnight, in deadlines that stack like bricks, in arguments at the dinner table, in the dull ache of loneliness, in the creeping fear of not being enough. The battlefield has changed, but the challenge remains, and so does the opportunity to grow from it. Today, most suffering is psychological. It hides behind schedules and screen time, behind the curated images of success we see online, behind polite smiles that conceal tired minds. The Stoics never imagined such a world, but their teachings remain surprisingly relevant, because what they addressed was not the shape of suffering, but the shape of the self that responds to it, and in that, nothing has changed. Let's begin with work, arguably the most common arena of modern stress. Pressure to perform, to compete, to climb. It's tempting to think that the stress comes from the job itself. But as Epictetus would remind us, it's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. This is the essence of cognitive behavioral therapy, a modern psychological approach directly inspired by Stoic thought. CBT teaches that our interpretation of events, not the events themselves, shape our emotional response. When we shift the lens, we change the experience. Imagine this: your boss criticizes your work, you feel anger rise. But what if, instead of reacting, you pause and reflect, what part of this can I control? You can't control their tone or timing, but you can control your response, your willingness to learn, your perspective. In that moment, criticism becomes a tool. You grow, and you suffer less. Another field where modern pain often appears is in relationships: rejection, misunderstanding, loss. Stoicism doesn't ask us to detach from love. It asks us to love consciously, knowing that everything is impermanent. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not hanker after what you do not have. Instead, fix your attentions on the finest and best that you have, and imagine how much you would long for these if they weren't in your possession." This is the basis of negative visualization, a Stoic technique in which we imagine the loss of what we cherish, not to wallow in sadness, but to sharpen our gratitude. When we practice this, we don't love less. We love more presently, more intentionally. We don't take people for granted. We learn to say, "I love you," not out of habit, but with awareness that it could be the last time. In this way, loss teaches appreciation, and pain deepens the heart. And then there's the crisis of identity, a quiet epidemic in a world of constant comparison. Who am I, really? Am I successful enough? Am I on the right path? The Stoics would say, start by writing it down, reflect daily. Seneca advised keeping a moral journal at night, asking, what did I do well? What did I fail to do? What could I have done better? This practice isn't self-criticism. It's self-clarity, a way to become your own guide. And when life feels overwhelming, Marcus Aurelius offers a grounding reminder. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? So much of our mental burden comes from things we never needed to carry. By filtering our commitments, thoughts, and expectations through this question, we clear space for what truly matters. Stoic wisdom also encourages simple living, not out of austerity, but for freedom. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." Simplicity is not about having nothing, it's about needing less. In a culture that equates self-worth with possessions, this is revolutionary. When we need less, we fear less, and when we fear less, we suffer less. Meditation, journaling, mindful breath, all of these are modern practices with ancient roots. They help us develop the very qualities Stoicism values: awareness, calm, resilience. These habits are not escape hatches. They are training grounds, like lifting weights for the soul. They help us notice our thoughts before we become them, to choose stillness in a noisy world. And what about fear, especially the fear of failure? Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Let that sink in. In a world obsessed with image, this is radical advice. To grow, we must be willing to look imperfect, to risk embarrassment, to fall. Because only through failure do we discover what we are made of. Fear is natural, but courage is acting despite it. There's also power in service. The Stoics saw duty not as burden, but as a path to fulfillment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. But this aliveness is not for us alone. It is meant to be shared, helping others, being useful, choosing virtue over vanity. These make struggle meaningful. Even in grief, Stoicism offers a strange kind of peace. Not by numbing, but by reframing. Everything that has a beginning has an end. Loss hurts, but, as the Buddha once said, all conditioned things are impermanent. To resist this truth is to resist life itself. Instead, Stoicism teaches us to open our hearts wide enough to contain both joy and pain, to walk through fire without losing ourselves. And in this, Stoicism aligns with many ancient traditions. The Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the teachings of the Buddha all speak of balance, of letting go, of living in accordance with nature. They remind us that peace is not found in perfect circumstances, but in inner steadiness. When we begin to see struggle as sacred, not something to flee, but something to face, our relationship with life transforms. We stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" That shift changes everything. It reclaims agency from fate. It turns pain into purpose. This is not an easy path. It is not popular, but it is powerful, and it is available to anyone. Regardless of background, status, or belief, the Stoics did not promise comfort. They promised clarity, and in that clarity, strength. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by noise, by doubt, by difficulty, pause, breathe, ask, what part of this is mine to carry? What part can I release? And then act with calm, with courage, with quiet resolve. In that moment, you are not escaping life, you are entering it more fully. And in doing so, you become a little more like the Stoics, not invincible, but unconquered, not hardened, but grounded, not perfect, but present. What would your life look like if you stopped avoiding struggle? If, instead of resisting every discomfort, you turned toward it with curiosity, with courage, with openness? Would your days look different? Would your inner voice be calmer? Would you still fear so much, or would you begin to feel free? These are not rhetorical questions. They are invitations. Because at some point, every life will meet hardship. It may come quietly, in the form of a health scare, a loss, a broken dream. Or it may arrive like a storm, fast, brutal, and unexpected. In that moment, we don't get to choose what happens, but we do get to choose who we become. Stoicism does not deny pain. It does not pretend the world is gentle. It recognizes what life has always been: unpredictable, uncontrollable, and often indifferent. But within this raw landscape, the Stoics found something extraordinary: the ability to remain whole. They believed that true freedom doesn't come from escaping suffering. It comes from meeting it with full presence and not letting it define you. Let's recall what we've explored. In the beginning, we stood with the lone mountain climber, struggling through mist and cold, unsure if the summit was even real. But he kept going, because the mountain didn't move, but he could grow. That's what adversity offers: the chance to stretch, to deepen, to discover reserves of strength we never knew we had. Epictetus, born into slavery, didn't break, he turned his chains into teachings. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by plague and war, didn't despair, he turned inward and found peace. Seneca, rich and powerful, didn't cling, he let go of everything except his integrity. These men were not superhuman, they were simply committed to seeing hardship not as punishment, but as preparation. And today, we live in comfort, but we ache in silence. We chase happiness, but feel hollow. Why? Because we were told that struggle is bad, that effort is a flaw, that pain is to be numbed, ignored, or outsourced. But the Stoics whisper something different. They say, suffering is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Listen closely. It's telling you what matters, it's revealing your values. It's sharpening your mind and opening your heart if you let it. Consider this: when you went through your hardest season, What changed in you? Did you become more humble, more thoughtful, more kind? Often, the deepest wisdom comes not from books, but from survival. From living through the fire and still showing up. That's not weakness, that's strength forged slowly, silently. So, what if we stopped labeling struggle as failure? What if we stopped asking, why me? And started asking, what now? This simple reframe gives power back to the self. And in doing so, it aligns us with the core of Stoic practice, choosing our response. Viktor Frankl, a modern echo of Stoic thought, survived the Holocaust and later wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. The last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That is Stoicism in action. That is the path of the inner warrior." Of course, not every day requires heroism. Sometimes, mental strength is found in the smallest actions, in getting out of bed when you don't want to, in choosing kindness when you feel bitter, in forgiving yourself for not being perfect. These moments don't make headlines, but they shape your soul. Adversity doesn't ask you to be extraordinary. It asks you to be honest. Who are you when things fall apart? Who are you when no one is watching? These are the questions that matter. And the Stoics would say, if you can live with yourself at the end of the day, with your choices, your efforts, your truth, then you are already strong. Pain will visit again. Loss will knock on the door, and that's okay. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be ready. You need to remember what Marcus Aurelius said. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Now let's return to that opening image. The climber, cold and bruised, still walking through fog. Perhaps, now, you see yourself in him. Perhaps the mountain isn't out there but inside you. Perhaps every hard day is a step. Every disappointment, a lesson. Every obstacle, a teacher. So here is the invitation. Stop waiting for life to get easier. Start getting stronger. Choose the hard road not because it hurts, but because it builds. Choose to show up not just when things go well, but especially when they don't. Choose to stay grounded, even when the wind howls. And now, as this reflection nears its end, let's pause and walk together into a final moment of stillness. Imagine you are walking through a quiet forest. The ground is uneven, roots twist beneath your feet. The sky above shifts with clouds. You are alone, but not lonely. Each step is effortful, but steady, and as you walk, you realize you're not just moving forward, you're becoming someone else, someone braver, calmer, wiser. The path is your sculptor, the stone is your mind. You stop to rest beside an ancient tree. The air is cool. The leaves whisper like old friends. You remember a line from Marcus Aurelius. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. You say it softly, and for the first time, you feel what it means. Your obstacles were never the enemy. They were the invitation to grow. You smile not because life is easy, but because you are enough for it. Because you have begun to see that you were never broken, only being shaped. You understand now that you do not walk this path to escape pain. You walk it to transform it, and in doing so, you transform yourself. So the next time life grows heavy, remember this: you're not being punished. You're being forged, and every challenge is a chance to meet a deeper version of you. A version that doesn't shrink from difficulty, but rises to meet it with grace. Thank you for walking this journey with us. See you in the next meditation.